Count Dooku's hypothetical triumph over Darth Sidious during the Clone Wars and subsequent rise as the Dark Lord of the Sith would radically alter the fate of the galaxy. The apprentice turning on the master has always been a hallmark of Sith tradition, but for Dooku, the outcome would be transformative not only for the Sith Order but for the galaxy as a whole. To imagine this scenario, one must understand Dooku's unique motivations, his vision for the galaxy, and the implications of his leadership as a Sith Lord unbound by Sidious's designs. Dooku, as a character, stands apart from other Sith in his complex ideology. Once a Jedi of great renown, his disillusionment with the Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic stemmed not from personal ambition, but from a genuine belief in the Republic's moral and systemic failure. Dooku's alliance with Sidious was, at least in part, a means to an end, a way to reshape the galaxy into what he believed would be a more just and orderly society, albeit one ruled by Sith principles. If Dooku were to overthrow Sidious, his reign would diverge significantly from Sidious's nihilistic vision of domination and control through fear. Dooku's coup against Sidious could occur through cunning rather than brute force. The Sith Code emphasizes power and survival of the fittest, but Dooku's aristocratic demeanor and tactical mind suggest he would rely on strategy and manipulation to eliminate his master. Perhaps Dooku, realizing Sidious's obsession with Anakin Skywalker as his future apprentice, would exploit this fixation. A clever ploy could see Dooku orchestrating events that force a confrontation on his terms, leveraging his own apprentices like Asajj Ventress or Savage Opress to weaken Sidious before delivering the fatal blow himself. With Sidious gone, Dooku would find himself at the helm of a galaxy embroiled in the chaos of the Clone Wars. Unlike Sidious, who thrived on the perpetuation of disorder to solidify his power, Dooku's vision likely involves a swift and decisive end to the war. His first step would be consolidating his control over the Separatist Council and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Dooku's oratory skills and gravitas would allow him to rally the fragmented Separatist leadership, presenting himself as the undisputed leader who had delivered them from the shadow of Darth Sidious's manipulation. On Coruscant, the Republic would find itself in turmoil. Sidious's absence would leave a vacuum in the Sith's orchestration of the war, potentially exposing the machinations behind the conflict. While the Jedi and the Senate might initially struggle to piece together the truth, Dooku's strategic acumen would ensure his next moves left little time for recovery. Unlike Sidious, whose secrecy was paramount, Dooku might adopt a more direct approach, revealing himself as a Sith Lord while framing the Republic as the true oppressor. He could present the Confederacy not as a collection of greedy corporations, but as a legitimate resistance movement against Republic corruption. Dooku's leadership style as the Dark Lord of the Sith would likely reflect his noble heritage and ideological inclinations. Unlike Sidious, who ruled through deception and terror, Dooku might attempt to establish a veneer of legitimacy for his rule. While he would undoubtedly use the Sith's dark power to maintain control, his reign could include reforms that resonate with his idealistic critiques of the Republic. For instance, he might implement a new form of governance in Separatist territories, using his Sith-driven authoritarianism to enforce order, but also addressing systemic inequalities that had fueled discontent. In doing so, Dooku could potentially win the hearts and minds of neutral systems, swaying them to his cause. However, Dooku's reign as the Dark Lord would not be without challenges. The Jedi Order, though weakened and demoralized, would remain a formidable opponent. Without Sidious to direct Order 66, the Jedi would survive the war in greater numbers. Dooku's personal history as a former Jedi would complicate matters further. Many Jedi who had known him during his time in the Order might see his betrayal as the ultimate failure of their ideals. This connection would drive them to oppose him with even greater fervor, forcing Dooku to confront the very institution he had once revered. Moreover, Dooku's relationships with key players in the galaxy would shape the course of his rule. Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, would be a critical factor. Dooku, unlike Sidious, might not be as invested in corrupting Anakin to the dark side. Instead, he could view Anakin as a rival to be neutralized, perhaps even sensing the threat posed by his connection to the prophecy. A confrontation between Dooku and Anakin would likely become inevitable, with the fate of the Force hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, the Galactic Senate would face its own reckoning. Dooku's rise might embolden reformist factions within the Republic, exposing corruption and weakening centralized control. Senators like Bail Organa and Padme Amidala, who had always been wary of the Republic's darker tendencies, might find themselves leading a resistance movement against both the Sith-led Confederacy and the remnants of the Republic's militarized bureaucracy. If Dooku succeeded in defeating both the Republic and the Jedi Order, his reign as the Dark Lord would bring a new kind of Sith empire into existence. This regime, though authoritarian, might lack the sheer cruelty of Sidious's empire. Dooku's desire for a more orderly and structured galaxy might see him rebuilding institutions, albeit under his absolute rule. The Sith's philosophy of strength through power would underpin his governance, but Dooku's aristocratic ideals might temper the excesses of tyranny that marked Sidious's reign. However, the dark side is inherently corrupting. Despite Dooku's lofty ideals, his reliance on Sith teachings and the use of fear to maintain order would inevitably erode his vision. Over time, his rule might come to resemble Sidious's more than he would care to admit. The seductive nature of the dark side would ensure that even Dooku, with his refined demeanor and high-minded rhetoric, would succumb to its influence. In the end, his reign might be defined not by the justice he sought, but by the ambition that had driven him to betray Sidious. In this altered timeline, the galaxy would not find peace. The Sith thrive on conflict, and Dooku's Sith Empire would face resistance from Jedi remnants, Republic loyalists, and the seeds of rebellion. The Chosen One's role in this reality would remain pivotal. Whether Anakin Skywalker fulfilled the prophecy by bringing balance to the Force or succumbed to the dark side under Dooku's reign, his actions would shape the galaxy's ultimate fate. Dooku's rise as the Dark Lord of the Sith presents a fascinating what-if scenario, one that underscores the complexities of power, ideology, and the Sith's enduring legacy of betrayal and ambition. The galaxy, ever poised on the edge of chaos, would continue to be a battleground for competing visions of order and freedom, with Dooku at its dark and commanding center. As Count Dooku consolidated his power, the nature of his Sith empire would come under constant scrutiny. Unlike Sidious, whose machinations spanned decades, Dooku lacked the depth of contingency planning to ensure absolute dominance over the galaxy. While his rule might begin with an air of legitimacy, cracks would soon appear, exacerbated by his reliance on fear and coercion. Even within his own ranks, dissent could become a serious threat. Figures like General Grievous or the remaining members of the Separatist Council might grow restless under Dooku's iron grip, especially if his policies conflicted with their own ambitions. One potential weakness of Dooku's rule would be his aristocratic detachment. While he possessed great charisma and strategic insight, his background as a nobleman might alienate those who sought a more populist form of leadership. Sidious, by comparison, excelled at manipulating every level of society, from the lowest laborer to the highest-ranking politician. Dooku, with his disdain for the masses and preference for hierarchical order, might struggle to maintain the loyalty of planets that had joined the separatist cause for economic or political freedom. His vision for the galaxy, though grand, would likely clash with the diverse motivations of his followers. Another critical factor would be the role of the Jedi Order in this alternate timeline. With Sidious's death, the Jedi would no longer face the orchestrated purge of Order 66. Instead, they would regroup and adapt, potentially becoming a guerrilla force dedicated to undermining Dooku's Sith Empire. Their survival would ensure that the light side of the Force remained a powerful counterbalance to Dooku's dark rule. Moreover, the Jedi's resilience might inspire hope among the galaxy's oppressed populations, providing a rallying point for rebellion against the Sith. The dynamic between Dooku and Anakin Skywalker would remain pivotal. In this alternate history, Dooku might perceive Anakin as both a threat and a potential asset. Unlike Sidious, who saw Anakin as the key to his long-term plans, Dooku's pride and suspicion might drive him to confront the Chosen One head-on. If Dooku attempted to sway Anakin to the dark side, his approach would differ from Sidious's manipulations. Dooku might appeal to Anakin's sense of justice and disillusionment with the Jedi, offering him a place in a new order where strength and resolve were valued above adherence to outdated dogma. However, Anakin's destiny as the Chosen One would remain a significant wildcard. If he resisted Dooku's overtures and embraced his role as a champion of the light, their conflict would define the galaxy's future. Anakin's raw power and unyielding determination could make him a formidable opponent, potentially leading to a confrontation that would determine the fate of both the Sith and the Jedi. Meanwhile, the political landscape of the galaxy would shift dramatically. Without Sidious's masterful manipulation of the Senate, the Republic would face internal strife as it struggled to recover from the war. Corruption and inefficiency would still plague the government, but the absence of Sidious's orchestrated schemes might allow reformist leaders to gain traction. Figures like Bail Organa and Mon Mothma could rise to prominence, championing ideals of democracy and justice in opposition to Dooku's authoritarian regime. The seeds of rebellion would likely be sown much earlier in this timeline. Dooku's Sith Empire, though less overtly brutal than Sidious's Galactic Empire, would still rely on oppression to maintain control. Planets subjugated under Dooku's rule might join forces with Republic loyalists and Jedi survivors, creating a coalition dedicated to overthrowing the Sith. This resistance movement, born from the ashes of the Clone Wars, would embody the galaxy's enduring struggle for freedom and self-determination. Dooku's ultimate downfall would stem from the very principles that defined his rise. His belief in order and hierarchy, while initially a source of strength, would become a liability as the realities of ruling a galaxy set in. The dark side's inherent corruption would erode his ideals, leaving him vulnerable to the same ambition and betrayal that characterized the Sith. Whether through internal dissent, the resurgence of the Jedi, or the intervention of the Chosen One, Dooku's reign as Dark Lord would face relentless challenges. In the end, the galaxy's fate under Dooku would be shaped by the same forces that have always defined Star Wars: the eternal struggle between light and dark, hope and despair, tyranny and freedom. While Dooku's vision for the galaxy might offer a temporary reprieve from the chaos of the Clone Wars, his reliance on the dark side would ensure that peace remained an elusive dream. The Sith's legacy of ambition and betrayal would continue, leaving the galaxy locked in a cycle of conflict that only the balance of the Force could ultimately resolve.